They say they come not to break Europe, but to remake it, divided by language. United by populism.
Sonst wird der Brexit nämlich nicht der letzte Austritt gewesen sein.
And a common enemy. They are Europe's far-right leaders, and together they are upending decades of EU rules and norms, laying siege from within. The man hoping to lead this patchwork of populists, Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini. His hardline Italy First manifesto helped transform his fringe party into government material. And now he wants to do the same across the continent, binding together ideological bedfellows, promising to tear up the rules.
Our objective is to finally be a force for government and change in Europe, to bring new blood, new hope, a dream.
Nuova linfa, nuovo sangue, nuova speranza, nuovo sogno.
His closest ally is Marine Le Pen, the head of France's far-right political dynasty. She learned to campaign with her firebrand father. Nationalism runs in her blood, but now she's gone her own way. The French flag-bearer for attacks on the elites, the EU and immigration. In the past, she called for France to leave the Union, but has since U-turned, seeking instead to strip back the EU's power.
We no longer want this European Union that is spreading unbridled globalization on Europe. Globalization without regulation means having slaves manufactured to sell to the unemployed.
Helping to banish the shackles of Brussels is Jörg Meuthen, of the Alternative for Germany, leading a party born in the chaos of the financial crisis, but who found success talking about migration, equal marriage and Islamic extremism. Unlike the others, they have threatened a Dexit, a German exit from the EU if the bloc fails to change.
If we want to avoid damage, we'll need to change our direction. Otherwise, Brexit won't be the last exit.
Then there is Viktor Orban, Hungary's proudly illiberal Prime Minister. His combative reputation recently earned him the praise of a kindred spirit.
Like me, a little bit controversial, but that's okay. That's okay. You've done a good job, and you've kept your country safe.
In his youth, Orban helped tear down the Iron Curtain. Now he shows off the fences he erected on Europe's borders. He and Salvini have formed a friendship of late, seeing themselves as manning Europe's front lines.
Mr. Salvini says that we need a new Europe, and I support his concept. I share his view. I too think that we need a new chapter.
But the success of the populist insurgency may well come down to whether Salvini can turn friendship into partnership. Orban was noticeably absent when Salvini's populists gathered for a final rally in Milan last week. The rain-drenched crowd, testament to the scale of the populist pushback. The main attraction, the man casting himself as Europe's salvation. At his back, a rising tide of anger and resentment.
Joining me now from the Brandenburg Gate here in Berlin is DW correspondent Maximiliane Koschek. Hi, Maximiliane. The populists we just saw ran a campaign focused on nationalism, security, and EU criticism. What issues are drawing people to the polls in Germany?
Well, some have called the European election a vote on climate, a so-called climate vote. We've seen that a lot in social media being talked about. And this is especially true in Germany, where we've seen the Fridays for Future, the young climate strike movement taking to the streets. Only on Friday, there were several thousand young people taking to the streets and urging those who are eligible to vote here in Germany to take a vote on matters of climate change against the global climate emergency. But since the last European election, 2014, we've also had in Germany the migration crisis in 2015. And this has been a topic that especially far-right populists like the German Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, has been campaigning on in this European election.
Populism is on the rise around Europe, as we just saw in the report. Tell us more about the situation in Germany.
Well, in Germany, there's on this day 68 million voters eligible to cast their vote for the European Parliament. And what we're seeing is that the turnout is probably going to be a bit higher than in previous years. Germany's always been a bit above average when it comes to the voter turnout in the European election, but still with 48% in 2013, it was still quite low, lower than on national elections.
How important is today's ballot? Could this really become a turning point in European politics?
Well, what we see is that the rise of populism here in Germany and across Europe is part of a larger story that's happening currently in European politics, which is the fragmentation of what we used to call the political landscape. And this is particularly true for Germany. So we've seen the rise of the far-right Alternative for Germany, but we've also seen the rise of left parties like the Greens here in Germany and across Europe. And what that meant is that a lot of these center parties, these big tent Volksparteien as they're called in Germany, like the Social Democrats or the Conservatives, are losing votes and are probably also going to lose a lot of seats in the European Parliament. And what that's going to mean for the European Parliament is that there's going to be much more need for fractions, for different coalitions to be formed on several issues before anything can be gained on the European level.
You said that the European elections are gaining traction. People are going out to vote or rallying for other people to go out and vote. Do you think it's a generational thing? Is this more of a movement among young people, or is this happening across the entire country and no matter the age of the voters?
Well, what we've seen in some DW analysis ahead of the European election is that even though young voters make a small share of the general electorate across Europe, they still have a significant impact on this European election, especially because they have been quite outspoken on a lot of issues that matter on the European level. So we've seen those young people taking to the streets on matters of climate change with the Fridays for Future movement. We've seen them taking to the streets in London on the case of the Brexit decision. And we've seen them taking to the streets also here in Germany, especially on the European Copyright Directive, on the upload filter. And this has also impacted a lot of elder voters who are the majority of the electorate to make this vote count.
Maximiliane Koschek, thank you very much.